My name's Kathy Scott Weaver. I'm with the Office of Undergraduate Advising and Research, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the 25th Karen Wetterhahn Science Symposium. The symposium is named in memory of Karen Wetterhahn, the late Karen Wetterhahn, Distinguished Professor of Chemistry, Associate Dean for the Sciences, and the co-founder of the Women in Science Project. Karen's love of science and desire to see more undergraduates have early research experience led to the idea of a symposium, and it started small. In 1992, the first symposium had 44 WISP first-year research interns and 2 seniors, and it was held in Alumni Hall. This year, we have 171 students presenting 149 posters. And here we are in the Life Science Center, and we don't plan to move anytime soon. A few other milestones that we've pointed out in your program book, and there's also a poster in the entryway. In '93, the Dartmouth chapter of Sigma Xi joined the symposium to start holding their Christopher Reed science competition for senior honors thesis candidates. In 1998, the symposium was named for Karen Wetterhahn, and we moved to this, our final, I'd like to say, lasting home in 2012. Please take some time after the keynote address by Ann Gelb to visit the poster session. It'll be on the first and second floor of the Life Science Center. We're gathered here today to do a few things: to celebrate the accomplishments of our many undergraduate researchers, to acknowledge the important contributions of all of you in the room, faculty members, research associates, technicians, graduate students, and postdocs who guide, coach, and mentor these young emerging scientists, and to recognize our broader science community here at Dartmouth and beyond, from the College of Arts and Sciences, Geisel School of Medicine, Thayer School of Engineering, Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, the Norris Cotton Cancer Center, and our partners up the road at the Cold Regions Research and Engineering Laboratory. You volunteer your time, your expertise, and your facilities in support of undergraduate research, and we simply could not do this work without you. Please join me in applauding all of your contributions. So we have a few things right now. I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Harrell, Dean of Libraries and Librarian of the College, who will announce the winners of the Award for Library Research in the Sciences.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased on behalf of my colleagues in the Dartmouth Library and the Friends of the Dartmouth Library. This is our second year in awarding prizes to undergraduates for library research and sciences as part of the symposium. This award recognizes students that demonstrate an exceptional ability to conduct research in the literature of their field and who have developed an outstanding pattern of research and inquiry. The competition aims to highlight the connection between the information research process and the scientific research process. We've asked students to reflect on their information research strategy in demonstrating the evidence of significant personal learning in their essays. We have had entries this year across the campus from math, environmental science, biology, DHMC Geisel, psychology, and engineering. But first, I want to briefly thank my colleagues. First, Katie Harding, Laura Lelligdon, and Jane Quigley. All three are from the Kresge Physical Sciences. Pamela Bagley, I don't know if Pamela is here, from the Biomedical Libraries, and Laura Barrett, who is Director of our Education and Outreach program. All of these individuals have helped in organizing this award in all its details, and there are a lot of details, I can assure you. And special thanks to Dave Izzo, who is here somewhere. Dave from the Biomedical Libraries, there in the back row, along with Katie, who helped with technical support for the poster sessions outside. It is now my pleasure to announce our 2 winners. The first is Alexandra Sclafani, class of 2018. Alexandra, are you here? Oh my. Well, okay. She's majoring in environmental science and probably doing something very important at this moment. Her project is entitled Upcycling Waste Streams for Suitable Aquaculture Feed. The essay was notable for its extensive bibliography, reflecting diverse sources and its connection of literature searching to the scientific process. The second award goes to Yi Xuan Haya. There, oh, terrific, wonderful, please come down. Yi Xuan is majoring in math, and her project is titled Drug-Dependent Growth of H358 Small Lung Carcinoma, which can be modeled by simple systems of ordinary differential equations. Her essay was notable for the breadth of resources and services used in an advanced search strategies. Congratulations. And there is a certificate and a letter, and the check is in the mail. Congratulations.
And now I'd like to introduce Dean Wilcox, Professor of Chemistry and Chair of the Dartmouth Chapter Sigma Xi, who will present the Senior Honors Thesis winners in the Christopher Reed Science Competition.
Thank you. So I'm delighted to be here once again to represent the Dartmouth chapter of Sigma Xi. Sigma Xi is a science honor society, much like Phi Beta Kappa. It was founded in 1886 by engineering students and faculty at Cornell University to recognize, promote, and honor science and all the science activities. So if you do your quick calculation, founded in 1886 or 2016, Sigma Xi is 130 years old. It has expanded since then to include all the sciences and all applied science fields, and even extends as far as to allied areas in terms of education in science, philosophy of science, and ethics, and a variety of related areas. Sigma Xi as an organization does 4 main activities. It publishes an award-winning magazine, American Scientist, if you haven't seen it. Wonderful articles that really bring science to life. It also advises the government. I think an organization that's made up of scientists has a value for that, to do that. It provides grants and aid of research that oftentimes help promote careers that are very young, that need a little bit of money for travel or some expense. And it also sponsors forums that help to educate the public and government on important and timely areas, including things like global climate change. The organization, the membership is, there's over 500 chapters of Sigma Xi, one of which is here at Dartmouth. Membership is over 75,000 every year. When they announce the Nobel Prizes, they always say, yes, look at all those who are members of Sigma Xi. Now, membership in Sigma Xi won't win you a Nobel Prize, but there is, certainly a connection between accomplished scientists being recognized by Sigma Xi for their accomplishments. Membership in Sigma Xi actually comes in 2 different levels. One is at the associate level for young scientists that show promise for developing a scientific career, and then at the full level for those who are actually accomplished scientists. The Dartmouth chapter of Sigma Xi, I don't remember when we were founded, how old we are, but we have a low number, so that's certainly an indication of that we've been around for a while. We mainly have 2 activities. One is to nominate members of the Dartmouth and greater Dartmouth community for membership in Sigma Xi, either at the full level or at the associate level. And the other activity we've taken on for many years now, and we're delighted to partner with the Women in Science program at the Science Symposium to hold our annual Christopher Reed Science Competition in conjunction with this. And so if you noticed, the foyer of the Life Science Building, all the posters there were posters that were presented by students who'd done senior honors theses in science. And we just completed the judging this afternoon. First of all, I'd like to identify the judges who are still here, maybe. Chuck Dallian Is Chuck here? Many of you may know Chuck. He runs the electron microscope facility and works with students all over campus. Robin Barbato, is Robin here? And Emily Anseth Smith. These are two of our chapter members from Krell down the road that are very active and help with the judging. Eric Griffin. Eric's back there in the back, professor of biology. Timothy Smith, there's Tim Smith, adjunct professor in the physics department, and myself. So it was a diverse judging team. And as usual, we were astounded, truly astounded by the research that we were presented by these approximately 20 senior honors theses. It's like comparing apples and oranges and kumquats, because it ranges from everything from cosmology to molecular biology. All participants in the Christopher Reed Science Competition will be nominated by the chapter for membership, associate membership in Sigma Xi. So all of them have certainly reached that level of recognition to be nominated as associate members. But in the end, we did have to decide on some winners in this competition, winners for the cash prizes that we award for this. And so I'm going to now announce the winners of this year's, the 2016 Christopher Reed Science Competition. Usually in a competition like this, there's first, second, and third prize, but oftentimes we can't contain ourselves and have to hand out more than three. So we'll start with third place prizes. Okay. So one of the third place prize winners was Iris Liu for her project, Teaching an Old Drug New Tricks, Sensitizing Cancer Cells to 5-FU by Inhibiting Checkpoint Kinase 1. Her advisor was Alan Eastman. Is Iris here? Oh. She'll put that prize up on her poster, as all of them will, so everyone can see them. Oh, yes, and Kathy reminded me one more thing, that the winners of the Christopher Reed Science Competition, their posters will be posted in Kresge Library for the coming year. So if you missed them today, you'll be able to see them till next year. The other third place prize for the Chris Reed Science Competition goes to Catherine Waichoff, whose thesis was Zonal Wind Profiles of Jupiter and Neptune. Her advisor is Robin Millen. And just to show that it doesn't matter where in the judging you appear, Iris was the very first poster we heard. Catherine's was the very last one we heard. So prize winners come at the beginning and at the end. Second place winner, one of the second place winners, for her poster entitled Oxidation Pathways in Ultra-High Molecular Weight Polyethylene, a Comprehensive Explanation of Joint Arthroplasty Degradation, Navedita Nagaraj. Is Navarita here? Oh, not here. Okay, well, we'll put this on her poster, though, but we'll give her a hand for wherever she is. The other second place prize winner for his poster entitled Vegetation Community Structure of Patches in an African Savanna, where we learned about termite mounds, Frederick Erickson. Frederick here? Oh, there he is. He walked in just in time. Second place. We usually do reserve only one first place prize winner for what we felt as in a consensus was the best presentation, the best poster, the best work. This was for her work entitled Genetic Characterization of the Non-Coding RNA AFU 182 in Aspergillus fumigatus reveals a role in cell wall homeostasis. Anne Strong. So that's an inspiration to all of the WISP students. Work hard, do an honors thesis, come back, and win a prize at the Chris Reed Science Competition.
And now I want to introduce Dan Rockmore, Professor of Math and Chemistry and Director of the Newcomb Institute for Computational Science. Did I do something wrong? No.
Not chemistry.
What did I say? Oh, Dan. Okay, let's start again. This is Dan Rockmore. He's the Professor of Math and Computer Science and the Director. He had a lot of titles on your Director of the Newcomb Institute for Computational Science, who will introduce our speaker.
Thanks, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce you today the keynote speaker for this year's Wetterhahn Symposium, Professor Ann Gelb, who is currently of the School of Mathematical and Statistical Sciences at Arizona State University, but we're happy to say that as of July 1, will be in our math department here at Dartmouth. We are very pleased about that. Professor Gelb's research focuses on the development of techniques for the applications of Fourier analysis. I think it won't be stealing too much of her thunder from her lecture by telling you, or at least reminding some of you, that Fourier analysis is the mathematics of wave and periodic phenomena, and as such is among the most beautiful and widely relevant mathematics that we know today. It's important not only for a range of important applications in day-to-day life, such as various forms of digital communication, or almost all digital communication, which reminds me that you should all turn your cell phones off now. But it's also important as a technique in a wide range of mathematics, perhaps most notably in number theory of all places, as it turns out. It's also a wonderful subject in and of itself and full of many beautiful and surprising theorems, and an area of research dear to my own heart. Professor Gelb works at both the theory and applications, and with respect to the latter, has a special interest in related computational questions, especially as they occur in image processing and climate modeling. In particular, Professor Gelb will speak to us today on mathematics in imaging from medical diagnosis, I'm hoping, yes, to synthetic aperture radar. Professor Gelb received her master's and Ph.D. in applied mathematics from Brown University. After a postdoctoral fellowship at Caltech, she moved to ASU, where she is now a full professor and is the former vice chair of graduate studies. Her tenure there has included a Sloan Research Fellowship, as well as extended stays at the Institute for Mathematics and its Applications at University of Minnesota, the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology in Bologna, Italy, and the Pierre and Marie Curie University in Paris. Over this time, Anne's work has been supported by the National Science Foundation as well as the Air Force Office of Scientific Research. In addition to her many papers and lectures, she has co-organized numerous workshops and is currently on multiple editorial boards, including the Society of Industrial and Applied Mathematics Journal on Scientific Computing, arguably the flagship journal in that area. I also have two data points from Anne's long and distinguished vita relevant to the Wetterhahn Symposium. Professor Gelb has just finished a 2-year stint as the Society's representative for the Joint Committee on Women in the Mathematical Sciences. And while at ASU, Professor Gelb has supervised at least, by my count, 15 undergraduate research experiences as well as master's and Ph.D. work, and we look forward to her continuing her great work here at Dartmouth. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to this year's Wetterhahn Symposium keynote speaker, Professor Ann Gelb.
Well, hi, it's really, really a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited for coming here next year. One of the main attractions to me about Dartmouth was its commitment to undergraduates and mentoring of undergraduate students. So hopefully some of the things that I'm able to talk about today will inspire some people to knock on my office door next year, and we can get some things going, because that would be really great. So the talk is a very general talk, so if you're interested in any more details, please feel free to contact me directly, because I can talk, as my husband would say, ad nauseum about this research, and it would be nice to have an audience that actually wants to listen. So, okay, so let me see if I can make this work this way. So this way? There we go. Okay, so when Kathy contacted me about this, she said it was important to give kind of a little bit of a history about myself and my beginnings. So I didn't know how far back she wanted me to go, but I'm a very literal person, so I just decided, okay, I'll start at the beginning. So I was actually born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is famous because of The Office, but we had nothing like that when I was growing up that I was aware of. So these are actually, is this the light here? These are actually my brothers and sisters. And I was thinking about this on the way on the airplane, and if you look at the six of us, there are 5 that ended up in studying the humanities in either literature or history, poli-sci, and then there's the one mathematician of the group, who's also the one left-hander of the group. And the other thing that I apparently did in Scranton was develop my fashion sense. Here I am in nursery school. There must have been some holiday, maybe Purim or something like that. And I remember some of these kids. Facebook helps with a lot of these things. So, and then this is a picture of me looking at my older sister, Barb, and I'm pretty sure that I'm figuring out how much water I can actually pour on her, even through my hands here, which I'm trying to get the maximum amount of a cup out of my hand. So already I was solving optimization problems there, and yeah, so that's it. So that's my childhood. And then sometime in 1979, my dad came home and announced we were moving to Laramie, Wyoming. Which was weird, and so, I didn't know anything about the West at all, coming from Scranton, and so I picked most of these pictures from the web, except this one, which is a Facebook picture. So I wanted to say that fashion was still in my blood there. But actually, this picture is from Arizona, because one of the things about growing up in Laramie is it was a small town, and it was very nature-oriented, and our junior high actually had a trip every year, a camping trip, a 9-day camping trip. I don't know whose idea that was, to take 30-some junior high kids on a 9-day camping trip. But anyway, we managed, and nobody was left behind, so that's always a good experience. And we went to Arizona. My mom says that I came home from this trip and announced that I was moving to Arizona. I have no recollection of that, but apparently it stuck with me. So yeah, so the other things that I really appreciated about Wyoming was that, it really was an old western town, and the university is there now, and I really developed this just love of mountains and open spaces, and New Hampshire has a lot of that. And yeah, well, so in Laramie, there are a lot of bars, and we had the latest drinking age of 19 before Ronald Reagan made everyone change it to 21. So I spent a lot of my summers there. So I thought I would put a picture up of that. Okay, then Laramie is cold, arguably colder than, I'm hoping it was colder than it will be here for me. It was very, very windy. And so when I got to college age, I had a choice between UCLA and Michigan, and I just was like, yeah, no, this is no choice. I'm going to UCLA. And I was lucky that I knew how to adequately, not well, but I could play loud, and I played the mellophone, and that's probably, I don't know what year this picture is from, but my spot was right about there in the U for the marching band, and that was a really great opportunity, of course, there. And the other thing is that So the other thing about the 1980s is that we always had really big hair. And I want to point out now that my hair is big. And Kathy said she even recognized me because of my hair. But this is a total accident now. Then it was good. Now it's just because that's what my hair does. So, but while I was a student, I took a lot of courses in different things. I was always a math major, but not because of any particular love for math, but because I just was, and I enjoyed it. But I took a lot of other courses, and one of my favorite courses was in paleontology. And I was just trying to remember what are things that stuck out to me. And one was about trilobites. The second was I really enjoyed the Greek comedies, and the third thing that I learned was that the Berlin Wall wasn't going to come down, and that, well, of course, was not the case. So, but yeah, so but then at one point I was a math major, and I remember enjoying my courses, but not thinking anything about what it was good for. I didn't really understand why I was learning anything until I had this course in mathematical modeling, and I really was attracted to this idea that you can use differential equations to model things like predator-prey models and the different dynamics between different species. And so I don't know what they say in the textbooks, but it's usually owls versus field mice or rabbit-fox problem. And I thought this was cute, so I put this up, but it's actually commonly called the fish-shark problem. So after this course, I started thinking, well, this is really interesting, and this was a very accessible problem that we had as undergraduates. And well, it's a little hard; it's nonlinear, so we learned about how these things sort of worked in general, and so if the rabbit here is the blue line and the fox is the green line, how do you present a symbiotic sort of relationship? And I thought that was really useful. It was a time when we were starting to really think about, at least I was, the environment and what we needed to do to make sure that we had preservation of species. So that was sort of my first real interest in taking my applied math somewhere as a degree. So, but I wasn't so sold on school, so I decided to go to Israel for a year to work on a kibbutz, and that's me in a chicken house. But then after about 6 months of that, I knew I had to find something else. So, yeah. While I was in Israel, I took the GREs, and I managed to get into graduate school at Brown. Someone had told me once that Brown was a really good place to go, so I applied there, and fortunately it worked out. And that's a picture of the division, and I posted here a picture of my advisor, David Gottlieb, mainly because I want the women and the men here to know that if you're going to go to graduate school, one of the most important things is who your advisor is and the kind of relationship that you have. And I was really, really fortunate that I had such a tremendous advisor to guide me through this process, and he remained a huge influence in my life. Even as a professor, until he passed away a few years ago. So I encourage you all to make sure you find good mentors in your life. Okay. So now things got serious, and I was asking all these questions. Well, so I wanted to do computational math because I really wanted to be able to solve problems that I thought were interesting about. Well, not necessarily about fish and shark, but just in general, in modeling, because you can't just solve models in your head. I mean, they're way too complex. So you're going to need some kinds of computational algorithms. But then, so you get something on a computer. Well, how do you know that it's a good answer? How do you know that it actually makes sense physically? And then, right, well, so then how do we know if our solution even makes sense? You see things happen in the real world, and does your model actually emulate that? And then, well, what are some of the complications that arise in developing numerical algorithms? A lot of these things have to do with how much data you have, and if you can trust your data, and if the data are noisy, or if you're missing a lot of data, or if someone's trying to interfere with what you're trying to do. So so all these kinds of questions, they're very complicated, and you can study a wide variety of things when you ask these kinds of questions. But in my case, I ended up on a topic called, which is basically surrounds the Gibbs phenomenon, which is probably going to appear on my tombstone someday. But anyway, so what is the Gibbs phenomenon? So I went to Wikipedia for this purposes of this talk, and you can read it as well as I can. But basically, there's actually this machine that's in the Smithsonian today. Although if you ask for it, they'll look at you like you're a complete lunatic. But it's there, and so anyway, so there was this device that Albert Michelson developed that he wanted to resynthesize the Fourier series. But so they erroneously thought that the reason why you couldn't resolve a square wave was because of machine errors. But actually, it's something mathematical that happens. Okay. In fact, the machine didn't. The machine itself wasn't good enough to see the problem that you would get from the Gibbs phenomenon. But basically he tried to use a finite series of finite trigonometric series to resolve a sawtooth wave. And what happened was that you couldn't resolve it. You could never resolve it. It would never converge. And they finally understood this to be the Gibbs phenomenon. So this is kind of a goofy explanation of it. So I'll write it better in a picture here. So let's say you have Fourier data, and as Professor Rockmore so eloquently stated, the Fourier data is very ubiquitous in nature, and we study it all the time, right? But in life, you're never going to have an infinite series of Fourier data. You're only going to have a finite number of data that you collect. So, well, this is in the signal processing sort of application. So let's say you want to approximate some function f, right? So let's say f is this blue function here. So this is not part of the function. It just stops here and here. So then there's a big jump here. And you have this basis. So you're trying to approximate this function using this trigonometric basis. But what they found was that this partial sum doesn't converge uniformly if f is not if f is only piecewise smooth, so if it's not analytic and periodic. And this was a big surprise. But look what happens is we add more and more. So the number of terms there would be the number would be this n here. And you see what happens is that there's no uniform convergence. You get, and this is just the sawtooth one. So you have all these oscillations here, and they don't get resolved. Okay. All right. So this was the sawtooth function that Gibbs was talking about. All right, so fine. So is this just some mathematical curiosity, or is there a reason why this matters? And it turns out that there's a very good reason why it matters. And this talk is based on a couple of reasons, but in actual fact, there are many, many more applications for this that happen in this effect. In fact, my Ph.D. wasn't about this stuff at all. It was about partial differential equations where you saw this sort of effect. Okay, so in some applications, the data you collect actually can be described as Fourier coefficients. So if you're talking about a two-dimensional image, you actually collect data. So why does that make sense? So let's say that f of x, y is sort of the image, right? Well, you don't collect the data of just the image itself. You collect maybe the line integral or something over, it's an integral, so it's over an area. You collect it over some finite area. So this is some normalized version of that. But what do you know about images and signals? They're never smooth and periodic. They always have discontinuities in them. If you want to measure the difference in tissues or something like that, they're always going to have discontinuities. So you end up with the Gibbs phenomenon, and that Gibbs phenomenon causes serious consequences. In particular, so in medical imaging, it causes misdiagnosis because you can't see the boundary of some tumor or something like that. Or if you're trying to do some target identification, you might misidentify the target because you can't really see where the edges are. So here's a picture of an example like that. So this actually is a very famous image used in image processing. I didn't know this, but it was like a Playboy picture. but now but I guess it's all over the. Her name is Lena, yeah. So, but it's all over you'll see this anywhere in the imaging literature. So if you take the Fourier transform of this image, this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is the actual. These are the data that you would collect for that, which comes up, like I said, in something like MRI or in synthetic aperture radar or something like that. But if you go to reconstruct it, just using sort of standard reconstruction, partial Fourier sum, this is the image that you get. So you can see all these sort of different artifacts going through there. Now, you can still pick out Lena pretty well, but imagine you're trying to see if there's some growth occurring here or something like that, then maybe you wouldn't see it so clearly. And this is a very simple case. The SNR is pretty good, and everything is collected in a nice sort of uniform way. So it gets worse and more challenging the more your data are corrupted. So let's talk about magnetic resonance imaging. So I put up this slide. I don't know if you can see it very well. So not so much for the physics itself, because the physics, this is sort of an explanation about how these spins all line up, and then, and then they precess, and then they rotate back, and you measure the signal like that. But what I find sort of funny about this slide, and this is something that appears in these sort of bioengineering textbooks, is that they say, okay, well, the energy sends a signal to a computer. The computer uses a mathematical formula to convert the signal into an image, and you're done. Well, that's nice, but there's actually quite a bit of work that goes into what goes on in this one sentence. And we need to spend time really understanding it. So I have a little diagram. So let's say you have this image here. And what the MRI machine does is it basically gives you something that looks like a Fourier transform. Now, this will come up a little bit later, but the Fourier transforms the MRI machine will collect data in different sort of trajectories. So you can either have a nice Cartesian trajectory, which means that you actually get a basis here. So this omega x and omega y are integers. Or you can have something that's a non-Cartesian trajectory, which means that you don't end up with a basis here, which means that a lot of the theory that you even understand about Fourier analysis doesn't actually line up. Okay, so then you get out this sort of Fourier data, and you don't get to really do an inverse. You just sort of have to do another process to approximate an inverse, and hopefully you'll get out, the MRI that you want. But here's the problem. So this image called the Shep-Logan phantom is a very sort of standard image that you see in the literature. That you see in the literature to see whether or not algorithms work. So this is sort of the Gibbs phenomenon for the Shep-Logan. This is a picture of what happens if you use filtering. So typically people use some kind of smoothing filtering to get rid of noise, and it also gets rid of sort of these Gibbs oscillations. But the problem when you use filtering is that it smears over the features that you're actually interested in seeing. So it's not a very good solution if you're trying to actually identify something that's important, some kind of feature. So what I studied in graduate school is something called the spectral reprojection. Spectral reprojection, which was originally developed by Gottlieb and Shu. So basically, they came up with this idea that seems simple now, but at the time was quite remarkable. That said, okay, well, the problem is that the Fourier basis is really just not a good basis for functions that aren't periodic. So let's assume that a piecewise smooth function is smooth in a smaller interval, but it's not necessarily periodic, and it's unlikely that it will be periodic. But there are a lot of other types of bases that are very appropriate for smooth functions that are not periodic, especially orthogonal bases like Chebyshev polynomials or Legendre polynomials or something like that. So if we were able to, instead of having Fourier data, if we had data that's more appropriate to the basis, like Chebyshev data or Legendre data, then we would have the right data for solving our problem. But we don't, right? We have Fourier data. So this would be the projection onto a good basis, like a good orthogonal polynomial basis. So the psi L is a family of orthogonal polynomials, right? And these would be the coefficients for this orthonormal basis. And that indeed would converge for a function that's smooth in an interval. But we don't have that, right? We have the Fourier basis, and we already said that because of the Gibbs phenomenon, that will not converge to the underlying function. However, you can design, there do exist a certain family of orthogonal polynomial bases, and under some restrictions, you can, instead of using the function itself, which you don't have, you can use the Fourier partial sum, which you do have because you have the Fourier coefficients. You can use those to generate the coefficients for this new basis, and indeed that will converge exponentially. So that's really, I know that this is a very fast explanation of something that took 7 years to sort of come up with, but that's really what's going on, and how you design this, which we call a Gibbs complementary basis. The devil is in the details there, and what kind of space that has to look like. But it's a very powerful idea that I was able to exploit while I was a graduate student in other types of problems. And that's when I did some of this climate things, because we did it also for spherical harmonics, so we can resolve the big gradients in mountains and those kinds of things, which were discontinuities. Okay. So another thing that I'm not going to talk about here, but I spent a lot of my research life trying to come up with edge detection algorithms. I'm missing a period. Edge detection algorithms from Fourier data, which is basically what I did when I was at Caltech. So you have a function that's not smooth and not periodic, but you can find intervals for which the function is smooth. You use an edge detection algorithm. So you have the Fourier data. Then you compute the Fourier partial sum in each smooth subinterval. Now that itself will not converge, right? That's this here. That will not converge to the function because it's not periodic. However, you can project it onto the Gibbs complementary space in each subinterval, and then you just join the pieces of the approximation together and you're done, right? So it's a very elegant, nice way to use Fourier data, which is the wrong data, to come up with the right solution. What's the benefits here is that we have very fast decay rate of coefficients onto the new basis, which means that you have enough information to recover a nice reconstruction. You have exponential, which means fast, uniform convergence, and there's no blurring like you would get if you used filtering. So this improves all diagnostic capabilities, and you can still use a fast Fourier transform, which is critical. So this is an edge detection algorithm that we use, which I didn't explain here at all, to find all these little regions of smoothness in the Shep-Logan phantom, right? So everywhere where it's black, you have smooth regions. And then this is the result once you do the spectral reprojection. So it's very, very effective. And because of that, I could get a Ph.D. So that all worked out well. All right. So I didn't put in anything of what I did at Caltech, but I arrived at ASU, and I met some people from the Barrow Neurological Institute, and they were interested in improving their image segmentation algorithms for MRI. And so I thought that this technique would be useful, and it turns out indeed it was. So there's I think this is from the McGill website that has this brain web. I think that's what it is. And this is their sort of segmentation of gray matter, okay? So if you use sort of the standard techniques, which are snake algorithms, et cetera, this is the segmentation you get. if you use our technique for first reconstructing the images using edge detection, and then Gegenbauer is the name of the Gibbs complementary basis that we used, then look how much better the segmentation is than sort of the standard way. So that was really a nice result. We also use this algorithm to do volumetric segmentation. So this is a cross-section of an image we're trying to segment here. If you try to do, so this is a noisy, so we're given noisy Fourier data for this. So if you do sort of standard techniques, which is sort of filtered Fourier reconstruction and then doing segmentation, you get something like this. But this is what we're able to reconstruct if you use our reprojection. So that's just by moving it into a smart space. And if you add more noise, the standard algorithms don't work at all, but we're still able to do something here. So we used that and applied it to some, so at the University of Arizona, which is not the same as ASU, people often make that mistake, but they have I don't know if they have this anymore, but at the time they had this small animal imaging resource. Is that what it was called? And they had these, this is a mouse brain. So on the left is sort of their standard segmentation, on the right is ours, and you can see that there's a lot more. I don't know what the correct answer is, to be perfectly honest, but it looks like we can see a lot more detail because we did this right pre-processing with this Gibbs complementary. And then this is a brain extraction, and so let's say, so the arrow points to a space where you can really see that when you do this extraction, you still end up with some skull piece, where in our case, you really are able to get the finer resolution. Okay, so this is, so then I had children. This is a picture of me and my husband. We got married in Wyoming. These are my two kids. They like wearing togas. And there's a lot of soccer in my house, and that's a picture of my boys at the Grand Canyon and sleeping after hiking at the Grand Canyon. So I just wanted to point out that I wasn't like I was doing all this in a vacuum. I still had the rest of my life going on at the same time. Okay, so, right. So in the last few years, though, something remarkable, well, I think is remarkable, happened in mathematics. And I think that it's not just in mathematics, but it's a whole new wave of data-oriented problems. I would say that when I was in graduate school, we tried to solve a lot of models from a deterministic perspective. We made a model using some kind of equation, Navier-Stokes equation or something, and we tried to develop the best program, the best algorithm to make it work. Well, now we really are much more data-focused, right? Everything is about big data, data-oriented problems, data-driven problems. And in mathematics, that's something that we're working very hard to address. And so if you were to take a numerical analysis course now, there would be a lot of emphasis on this. So while the Gibbs phenomenon, we're able to resolve it, and we have a good understanding of it, that's really, really good. But in real life, the problems that we're given are much, much more complicated. There's a lot of noise corruption. We have problems where the data is noisy. The data are noisy. They're not well resolved. Anyway, I write about this here. So let's say, again, we're given some Fourier data. So we already have the fact that the underlying image or function is not going to be smooth. Okay? So we have some way of solving that. The given data are typically not sampled in a nice structured way that allows us to use a standard basis, like a Fourier basis. So in the recent years, I've done a lot of research in this regard. So in sort of general broad brush, we use non-uniform FFT algorithms, and mathematics has really helped to design these algorithms so that the methods actually converge as you have more and more data available. And then the third problem is something that I think computer science also works a lot with, is that when you have this sort of undersampling problem. So you don't have a unique solution anymore, and you have to pick the best solution out of a multitude of possible solutions. So what do you do? Well, how do you do this? so let me address this problem a little bit more. So let's just take a one-dimensional example. So this problem would have Gibbs phenomenon because it's discontinuous. But then let's say we remove some of the Fourier data at different values. So instead of having a nice, all the grid points of, this is in real and imaginary parts of the Fourier data. So let's say we only take a sample, some sampling of this collection here. And that's all the data we're able to use to reconstruct the problem. This happens in real life because number one, you may not get that data to start with, or number two, you want to process the data quickly, so you want to be able to only use a little bit of it. But look what happens. The Fourier reconstruction makes no sense anymore. Okay? And even if you filter it, it still makes no sense. We don't even understand this behavior in the same way we do as if we had Gibbs phenomenon, which is behavior that we do understand because it corresponds to a particular basis that we know. So what's a woman to do, right? I mean, it's very hard. So this L1 regularization has really come on very strong in a variety of different communities. I just put up some names here, and no doubt I'm missing a lot of names, but the MRI people are certainly using it, people in different imaging and signal processing communities. So what it says is the following. So it's an optimization problem that says you want to minimize some solution. So you learn this in Calc 1, right? You learn about minimizing using derivatives. So you want to minimize this functional such that you have some kind of data fit. Okay, so this f hat, this is the vector of data that we have. So it's some transform of what we want to get underlying this image should match that data, because that's the data that we have. Right, so in this case, I write that F is the Fourier transform matrix. But J here is some appropriate L1 regularization term used to promote this thing called sparsity of some feature of F. So we say a priori, I know some feature of this F is sparse. And so what does sparsity mean? So in our case, we can say, well, an image has a finite number of edges. There are only a few places where there are discontinuities in an image. Everywhere else, it's smooth. So therefore, images are what we can say sparse in the edge domain. So that's where the sparsity is. So if we take a mapping E that takes F to the edge domain or of F, then if we can make this small, then it's likely that we have a good solution because this value should be small. This measure should be small in the sparse domain. So the goal now is to construct an approximation to E. Okay, right, so the general idea, so we came up with this idea a couple of years ago, and this is actually what I have my Air Force funding now for mainly, is we want to design this transform matrix. M is the order, we called it polynomial annihilation. It's a nice name, to approximate this edge map. Okay, so edges are sparse and piecewise smooth functions, which is what we said. But in smooth regions, you think that an image can be approximated by a simple polynomial, which also makes sense because that's a good enough approximation for a function. So if we annihilate the nth degree polynomial approximation, so think about Taylor series expansion of a smooth function, everything else will be, it's going to leave something very small because you've annihilated all the first m polynomials except near the edges. So as m increases, this residual will also decrease in smooth regions. Therefore, if we force this to be small, that's a good way to regularize the solution. So this idea of polynomial annihilation is new, but if you make m equal to 1, it's the same as a TV regularization, which is very familiar to people in mathematics and computer science. And if you're interested, you can look at this paper. So this is an example. It's basically a high-order divided difference matrix for what this sparsifying transform can look like. So look what happens, right? So if we solve this problem and we minimize, if we use TV, which is was the gold standard when we started, you get all these things that look like piecewise constants. Why? Because it expects the solution to look like a piecewise constant in smooth regions. As you increase the degree of the polynomial of annihilation, then it expects the solution to start looking like other degrees of polynomials, which is a much better match for these kinds of things. So this is really, well, I'm really excited by this because it allows you to see variation in tissues and so on and so forth in the smooth regions of images. So now I'm working on this problem in synthetic aperture radar, which is really, really much harder than what I've done before. So it's a lot of devil in the details, but let's say, they want to be able to distinguish the difference between this kind of car and that kind of car based on some reflective coefficients that come out of the cars. So this is just to sort of tell you where I am, and if you're interested in maybe coming to talk to me next year, this is what you'll get an earful of. Oops. So we want to figure out a way to do this composite image formation, which is basically how to reconstruct images from subapertures. So let me show you our results so far. This is definitely a work in progress. So the top picture, oh, this slide is not, oh yeah. This top picture here, that's if you actually get the best option of reconstructing. So it's very slow. This would be the best figure that you would get if you did the process that you used in here, but you used the subaperture. So that's sort of the gold standard in the method that we're using. So here is a variety of different tests that we chose to do this using this L1 regularization. And what you can see is sort of what people did up until now. So this is just least squares here. And then these are sort of standard, these three are sort of standard L1 regularizations that people have been using. And this is our polynomial annihilation method on the bottom here with 1, which is like TV, and 2, which is saying that everything should look like a piecewise linear, and here piecewise quadratic. So there is some power to this method, but we're still working on resolving these sort of images. And there are a lot of data. It's a very, very complicated procedure. Okay, so where do we go from here? Well, to be quite honest, I don't really understand SAR as well as I would like. There's information that's out there that I have to figure out a way to exploit better to put into these mathematical algorithms. Also, I don't understand all the different sources of noise that are in the data. We definitely need to figure out a way to refine these regularization techniques so that they can apply to the particular problem that we have. And the explanations themselves are intuitive, but we really need more mathematical rigor so that we're convinced that what we're seeing as results are good results. There's a new idea that we're working on now that's actually for MRI that we're using is in sequential imaging. There's an idea that things are jointly sparse. So that means that if you take a bunch of images in a row, they should have sparsity sort of in the same places. So if you exploit that, then you can reduce the overall time you need to collect MRI data, which will improve the procedure because there'll be less. The patient will have to be on the machine less. It'll be less costly. They won't move around as much. So it's all good if we're able to do that. And finally, there are a lot of other applications for this. That either there's earthquake data, noise reduction in audio signals. So if you want to hear a conversation under some loud vuvuzela, which I'm sure everybody wants to do, so you can do something like that. And then there are other kinds of medical processes, and then the data assimilation and different big modeling. So that's it, and thank you very much for your, these are my future Dartmouth. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have a little bit of time for questions. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask? Okay, we'd like to get you a microphone because we're videotaping. Sorry, hold on.
I'm interested in sort of the inverse case, which is where you have lots of non-connected parts. So like, if you take a pointillist painting. You know, the famous one of the ear where you can see it across the room, but you can't see it up close.
Yeah, I myself have not done research in that area, but a lot of people that use these types of techniques that use sort of L1 regularization, these kinds of things, I know they have a big group at UCLA that does this sort of thing. It's the same sort of big picture. The question is what do you choose to regularize to make the best solution?
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't have to pick the boundary.
No, you decide. So what I think has changed a lot in the kind of math that I do is that we used to sort of say, well, let's pick some big general PDE that basically applies to a lot of different scenarios. But I believe now, this is my belief, that we really say, no, certain things apply to certain situations, and let's really try to refine the techniques so that they best apply for that. So any kind of information that you can exploit from the beginning to make your algorithm arrive at the better solution, if you can exploit it in a mathematical way, like some kind of regularization term, then that's the way to go. So I don't know what they do for in-painting, but I'm sure that there's something that they try to enhance that they can do in it.
You could choose polka dot basis.
Sure, you could do whatever you want. Right, yeah, whatever, right. So it's just whatever the transform that makes sense.
Questions?
I have a non-technical question. Just given the venue, what can you say about the transition from undergraduate? I mean, you had a year with chickens, so
Yeah,
let's
and
neglect
watermelon,
that.
but I didn't have a picture of the watermelon.
But maybe just a few words about, you came from undergraduate, you were just solving problems that were handed to you, and then
Yeah.
you start graduate school and you don't actually know if there's a solution to the problem, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly the issue. Is I think that we have a lot of bright students who can solve a lot of good problems that are in the back of the book, so to speak. I mean, they're more complicated than that, but they're things that we know the solutions for, and we're not doing as well at giving them problems that are more open-ended. So I think that it's really important for undergraduates to think about at every step of the way, and to really make sure that they demand of their professors to explain to them, well, why is this useful? What kind of problems do these show up for? And when does this not work? And what can we do? And really and focus on fundamentals, because so many things come back to linear algebra and calculus and stuff that we sort of gloss over because we understand inherently how to the methodology, but we don't really understand what's lying underneath. But I think that here, it seems to me that the students have a huge opportunity to learn a lot about why things matter, and that's when you learn, is when you have to use them.
Anybody else?
But working with chickens is good too, because it makes you realize that you want to do something else.
Okay, this back to a technical question, hopefully. So early in your presentation, you said that the way you attack the Gibbs phenomenon is to take piecewise smooth functions and model discrete portions and then assemble them together. At the assembly point, do you do any special treatments to smooth them? Do you maintain slope continuity, things like that?
No, that's the beauty of this particular spectral reprojection method, is that other methods, you need to know more about the discontinuities rather than just their locations. You have to also know like the magnitude of them or something like this, which gets increasingly difficult to do as there are more and more noise, as the data are more and more noise infested, so the SNR ratio goes down. So no, so there is no smoothing. The idea of the method is that you find the right space to project your solution into, and you make sure that what you can't see, the data that you can't see, has very low impact in that space. So that preserves your decay rate of your coefficients, so you can have the fast decay. But all that said, and believe me, I got a lot of mileage out of the spectral reprojection stuff. I think for the problems that we see today, by and large, we have to go to things that exploit other information, because we simply don't have as much data as we would need for the spectral reprojection.
So, can I talk here? I think we have to bring this to a close. You're going to be here for a while. We have a poster session that's starting now till 7. I really encourage you to go check all the posters. And WISP interns in the room, if you could please come forward for a one group photo. Thank you all for coming. Have a great Thank you, Anne.